everyone, it's Teresa here from Teresa's Crafty Cabana. Today I'm just going to do some playing around on my gel plate. I had a few people give me some ideas of things I can try with my golden paint, so I'm going to try that today. I've got these acrylic markers. I wanted to see how well these would work on the gel plate. My idea was I wanted to see if I could trace something like this picture from a magazine, and I just put my gel plate on the piece of plastic that comes in the container, and that way it doesn't stick to the magazine and I can move it around to the spot that I like. It does move a little bit too easily at times, but I was able to find my place pretty easily again. And I'm just using it as kind of more like a guide to follow the flower print, but not like exact. So I'm just using my red paint, and this is the paint markers. I got these markers from Hobby Lobby, and they said that they are acrylic, but typically when I think of paint markers, I think of either the dye inks or the pigment inks that you would see in like your stamps. So these are really cool because they are acrylic. You can layer with them. If they're still wet, you can blend them a little bit, and they do hold onto the gel plate really nicely. I was a little worried there were some kind of like lines in my paintbrush marks, my strokes, that I was afraid I wasn't going to get a really good impression when I pulled my print, but I think it looked really cool. So I was pretty happy with how these paint markers were working out. I don't know how they compare to Posca markers. I know those are paint markers that you have to shake, and then you have to depress the nib until the paint comes out. These, you don't have to do that. You don't have to shake them. The paint just starts flowing. But I will say they are, yeah, they're pretty opaque. I was going to say a little bit transparent, but actually they are pretty opaque. If I were to paint behind this, you wouldn't see that color. So on the gel plate, I had to keep that in mind. What I was painting in the back had to be somewhere in an open area, or else you weren't going to be able to see it. And especially as the paint dried, anything I put behind the dried paint, you weren't going to be able to see unless there were gaps in the openings. So just a little something to think about if you're using paint pens like these. Now I'm going in with some greenery, and obviously I'm not following what's in the picture anymore. I'm just kind of making in my own picture at this point. I wanted the plant to be in a pot, so I'm going to use the purple. I'm also testing to see if all of the colors are as vibrant as each other. Sometimes with marker sets, you'll find a few of them are really bright and colorful and work really well, and then some of them just aren't. Or I always feel like sometimes in a set there may be those few that just don't feel like they belong, or they don't match the colors of the others. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is just using this time to play around with these markers, see how the pigment is in them, and see how well they go down. And that tip, I really like how this one has a brush tip to it, because I can get some smaller details with that. So far I'm enjoying these. So after I added all the pinks, reds, greens, I wanted to add a little bit of yellow, and I started adding it like it was going to be a part of the leaves. But then I realized I needed a color for the background, and I was running out of colors in my marker box. So I went ahead and just made the background yellow. So for this test, I am testing to see if it will cover large areas on the gel plate. It is separating a little bit over here, so it does take a couple of layers if you want like a really good coverage. You can see with this yellow, you can see those brush marks pretty well. So just something else to keep in mind. The paint was taking a little while to dry, so I took my little butterfly stamp, my foam stamp from PM Artist Studio, and I'm just putting some little butterfly impressions in the yellow wet paint area, just to see if that captures anything. And for my final step, I'm just going to use my white paint pen and put some highlights on the leaves and some of the flowers, any spaces that had just a little bit of the gel plate still showing through. And because these markers dry matte and the gel plate is shiny, I was able to see what was left on the plate. The white is a very opaque white, so I do like that about the opacity of all of these paints so far. To pick up this print onto my paper, I'm going to use this bright gold from CraftSmart. I wanted a shiny color or a metallic color on the back to pull the print because the metallics tend to be a little more transparent, and I just wanted a hint of anything that was left on the plate, like behind the butterflies and maybe just a little bit inside the plants. And you'll see even on the blue part where the table is, all of that will have just a nice little shine to it using this gold paint in the background. A silver paint would have looked nice too, but I wanted to use the gold because of the yellow and the flowers. I felt like they would look good with gold. So I cut up some of my rice paper. I also got this from Hobby Lobby. I got a roll, and the last time that I was using the rice paper, my first time, I was such a noob. I was using the untreated side, and I was, I think it was Tracy, thank you for telling me, told me I should be using the treated side. So I gave that a try today, and much better. I like how these prints come out better than on the other side. Now, I am told with rice paper, you don't want to leave these on your gel plate for too long. I'm still learning, so I haven't had an episode where I've torn my paper yet, but I did keep that in mind, and I did not leave it on the plate very long before I pulled the print off. You can see those little bits of gold through the openings, like where the butterfly wings are, a little bit inside the flower blooms, and then a little bit on the bottom where the blue is with those lines. So I think that turned out really nice, and it looks like a painting. So I was really happy with how this turned out. Now I'm going to try my golden paints again, and for this first little technique right here, I just wanted to add a little something to my gel plate or print that I had just made, and I have some magazine clippings with some words, so I'm just using the teal color, and I'm kind of looking at where I'm going to be picking up these spots from on my print, so that's helping me figure out where to put paint. And then I'm just using the word side down and figuring out where I want to pull this from. This is going to create a little texture of words, and the reason this works is because it's toner, I believe. That is, the ink is not sticking to the toner, but the ink is sticking to the paper, so it removes everything except what's on the toner. I am working in real time here. I wanted to capture this while the paint was still wet and put that right over my print. So that was my teal color, and on the yellow it looks like a green. So it turned out really nice. You can read the words even. So I thought that was a really cool little addition over this print, and I'm really quite happy with this little play session of this print. Next I'm going to try just a little bit more with the words. I'm cutting or kind of tearing apart. This says pretty in pink, and then just some other words. This is all from a magazine that I got from Dollar Tree, and they have like different kinds of like magazines for, you know, $1.25, and this one had a bunch of like container gardening and gardening ideas, so had a lot of florals in it, and I really thought that was nice to use for trying the technique of transferring them on the gel plate. So here I am mixing my red and my blue to create more of a purple color in the background, and I had to use a lot of paint. I probably should have used a little bit less since I was putting both colors down. I would like to get a purple one day, so that would be on my next color that I'll probably try to get for the golden paints. So I'm just laying down. Now this print didn't have a lot of contrast in it. Had a lot of green, which I like, but that doesn't help with when you're doing this technique. You need a lot of contrast, so black against white to really get a better pull or a better transfer of whatever you're pulling. Also, I don't know if I left it all down either long enough or maybe too long. The words transferred over here, but not all of the words underneath it. And then this one, which was on the longest amount of time, you can see that there is some kind of a design left behind. I don't know that I would be able to tell what it was without seeing the magazine piece first. So not the best transfer, but I did realize that it was probably because of the lack of contrast. Here I did use probably a little bit too much paint on this one too. I wanted to have a lighter, like a white mixed in with my colors. So I'm adding a drop of white to all my little drops of color. The bottom I have the blue and the green together, or the blue and the yellow, so I'm trying to make a green on the bottom. Then I have kind of like the yellow and pink on the top, where I will make more of like an orange for like a sky. It didn't roll off my brayer too well, so some of that green color did get up into the pink and yellow area. the paint was still pretty thick on the gel plate, so I'm just going back over it all with my brayer just to try to get some of that removed. Here I'm using rice paper again. I cut my rice paper to be the exact same size as my gel plate, so I had to be very precise when putting these down. There wasn't a lot of overlap or room for error. Also, this one, the paper got stuck on both ends, so in the middle where they came together, the paper crinkled just a little bit, but I don't think it's going to affect my print. It might give it a little bit of texture though. So to me, this looks more like a mountain scene, like where the dark blue is in the middle there, and like the greens and the blue. But I do like that the pretty in pink actually is where the pink is. So I'm okay with this print, and I think it'll be a good background print for something. Now I'm just gonna put one color on the plate and brayer this out. This is the phthalo blue, just the green shade, I believe. Now this is where I want to experiment with the spritzing water on the background. So while the paint is still wet, I have my little mini mister, and I'm just spritzing down some water. I had tried this with alcohol when I first got these paints and I was testing them out. The alcohol didn't really do much, so I can't remember who, but someone told me to try water spritzing instead, so thank you for that tip. And it definitely had a really cool effect. So I'm kind of playing around with what is considered too much water and, you know, what is the effect if I add a little more water. So that's kind of what I did here. They do bubble up and bead up like you can see there. I was using my hairdryer to try to speed that along. They just wouldn't dry. I think if I had left it overnight, they would have dried eventually, but I wanted to just keep working, so I used this kind of scrap piece of rice paper to pull those dots. So now I can go in with what colors I'm going to pull my print with. I'm using the turquoise and the extra sheen. That's just going to give that turquoise a little bit of shimmer. It's a tin color, so kind of like a silver. So as I was pulling it up in the corner here, a big chunk of that paint did not pull up with my print. And then a little bit more over on the side here. I don't know why that was starting to do that, but it was happening to my last few prints on this plate. So I don't know if that paint was just stuck on so good. But it still made a really pretty looking print. The silver mixed in with the turquoise made a really nice blue color, and I think it looked like ice, kind of like ice crystals. So I was really happy with that, how that one turned out. But it also reminded me of like coral, like underwater reef, but the colors weren't quite right. So this is my attempt to try to recreate that and use a little bit of different colors in the background. Okay, so here was my crazy idea. I put the blue down first, pulled the bubbly water spritz, and then I wanted to add orange and kind of like a reddish orange because I wanted to make an orange color because I don't have an orange in this golden paint. And then I put some green down at the bottom. I am mixing white into all of these, and I'm kind of trying to go for a colorful reef with the oranges and yellows. So I am wanting to have some of that shimmer. I liked how the tin color added like a lot of shimmer to the final color, so that's what I'm adding in the little areas in between here. But again, this was a lot of paint, so as I was spraying this out, I definitely had to roll off some of this paint because it was a pretty thick layer. I haven't had a lot of success in these prints getting this texture, the peculiar pebbles texture from PM Artist Studio, to show on my final prints, so I'm trying it in a few different areas on this print while the top layer is still wet. And before that top layer dries, I'm going to put my piece of rice paper down and pull my print. You would think at this point I would start pulling from another direction and maybe this wouldn't keep happening, but nope, I keep going for the same corner and the same thing keeps happening. Does this happen to anyone where the paint just does not want to pull up every single pull? Anyway, I still thought it looked cool because I think that was the only way I was able to see that texture from the stamp, is because it didn't all pull up. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to see that texture through all that other paint. And the little kind of bubbles and spritz marks on here, I think it looked really cool. So I don't know if it looks like coral reef to me, but I like the colors anyway. So because I wasn't too convinced that one looked like coral reef, I'm going to try another something different here. I'm using black this time with my two blue phthalo colors. One's a phthalo red shade and one is a phthalo green shade. And I'm just gonna make an ombre on these, and I'm going for like an ocean floor here. And again, spritzing to try to make these my little coral reef blooms in the bottom of the scene, and then kind of like into the water scene. So again, let that dry for a little bit with my blow dryer, and then I used my rice paper to pull off the parts that were still wet. So here's my idea, kind of comboing my first print with this last print. I am going to use my paint markers to try to make these blobs look like coral reef by kind of adding some of the light green, the yellow, the red, and mixing those together because I don't have an orange in these markers, and just kind of seeing if I can create a cool look. To pull this print, I'm using my turquoise again because I have the darker blues in the front, and then I've got kind of some of those bubbles showing. So I'm using the turquoise and just the silver together, kind of like I did on that first one that looked like ice. And I'm seeing if I can get a nice background from these two colors together. We'll see if I learned any lessons on this one. So I put the paper down the correct way. It didn't get caught on both sides. And now I have to see if I remember to not pull it from the bottom right corner. So there, I was about to. And then I realized I should probably try from another corner. It was pulling away a little bit on this side. So I don't know what it was about this side of the jelly plate. It was just being stubborn as could be. Now I am still learning my golden paints, so I don't know if maybe the golden paints aren't as sticky as some of the more opaque paints. Maybe that's why it's not pulling up so well. I got a good amount of that corner pulled up, but there were still some pieces that didn't. So you can see that really dark, almost like a purpley blue, is what was left on the plate before I did this print over it, well, the paint over it. So here's my coral reef look, and I think this looks a lot more like coral reef than just blending those other paints together. And I was able to just get little areas with different amounts of color. So I think that this looks really cool. I might play around with that one a little bit more with the coral reef idea and the spritzing of the water, and just see what kind of prints I get just playing with that technique. So here are the prints that we made today. I have the floral one with the markers. Then I have this where I pulled the texture from a magazine and just did a blend on the background. And then I have the one that looks like ice. It has the tin mixed with the turquoise in the background and then the pretty blue in the foreground. This little crackling down here looks really cool. This is without the shine. I don't think I had any metallic on this print. It was just all paint. But those little dots or bubbles, I thought those looked pretty cool. And then for my final print, the coral reef attempt, this looks like it could be some coral reef sitting on a rock at the bottom of the ocean. So I think these are really fun, and I would like to play around with these a little bit more, especially the golden paints, and still figure out what I don't know about them and learn them that way. So I do have a lot of fun just kind of playing and seeing what I would like to try again on my jelly plate. So I hope you enjoyed watching, and maybe this gave you some ideas to experiment a little bit on your jelly plate with some existing paints or markers, or something that you have in your stash that you haven't tried yet. So let me know what you're playing around with and how are your prints turning out. I would say this is an overall success. I'm happy with how these turned out, and I will see you in the next video. I'm contemplating doing a collage sort of thing. There's a collage prompt on the makers page for PM Artist Studio, so we'll see what I end up making for my next video. But I hope to see you there. In the meantime, happy crafting!